Hello, Universal fans, and welcome to another episode of VincentVision. Watch out! In this video, we're going to be getting into a very fun topic, a video that I've wanted to make for a while now. We are going to be talking about abandoned Universal. There are tons of old rides and shows that used to exist here in the parks that have been left behind. And while Universal usually does a really good job using the space in their parks to build new rides, keep things fresh, there are still some areas of the park that only really serve as a reminder of things that used to be. I want to show you those places, talk about what used to be here, and what's left over. Some of these former rides and shows are probably things that you've experienced yourself, or have heard about, but I'm hoping I can teach you something new and show you some things you didn't know about before. Now, before we get into this, I want to say that all the clips that I have filmed for this video are all things that you can see and do in the park on your own. I did not sneak around and go to places I wasn't allowed, and you should not try to do that either. Universal takes that stuff very seriously. This video is not meant to try and encourage you to take the extra step and get yourself in trouble. Universal will get you, and they will get you good. Okay? Let's get started. We are going to be starting this video off at Islands of Adventure. This park, out of the two, definitely has the most abandoned and leftover places to find, which is weird considering this park is newer than Universal Studios Florida. A lot of change here at IOA for the better, but something I do miss sometimes that makes the park feel more grand was the Island Skipper Tours. This was a boat that would take you from the entrance of the park to Jurassic Park back and forth on themed boats across the lagoon. This opened with the park in 1999 and only existed until 2001. If you go down to the water, you can actually see the remnants of the former entrance to the boats, and for the most part, it's pretty preserved. The queue is all still there. There's a dock that looks like it's been renovated to become theming in recent years, and when you stand in front of it, you can clearly see where you were meant to enter and exit the ride. It's pretty cool. The dock at Jurassic Park has been demolished. Support beams for the Velocicoaster now exist in that space, and if you've walked through that area behind the Popeye ride, you're at what would have been the third stop for the boat tours if they had continued. It's such a little space that you really can't do anything with, so I expect the remnants of the Island Skipper Tours to stick around for a very long time. Our next stop is Seuss Landing. There's a little area right behind One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish that you might have never noticed because, well, frankly, there's not really any reason to go back there. Behind the ride is a big stage in a quiet area with a lot of open space. This is where they used to perform Oh, the Stories You Will Hear in the park. Now, the show still exists. It happens over by the All the Books You Can Read gift shop, and it's much easier to catch if you're walking through the land, which is probably why they gave up on this spot. It's a little too tucked away, and I bet a lot of people didn't know it existed back here, which is why I think they scrapped this stage. It's a pretty small stage, just enough room for the characters to dance around. You can see some leftover poles which used to hang banners of the Dr. Seuss characters. Another fun way that this stage was used was for Halloween Horror Nights in 2004, back when the event happened in both parks. This is how you would get to the Field of Screens scare zone. This was a scare zone that would connect the two parks, and this was meant to be like a scary cornfield maze. Didn't expect to get some HHN lore in this video, did ya? Well, don't worry, there's going to be some more coming up later, that's for sure. Now, this next one is a big one, literally. This is probably the biggest abandoned space in the park, and also one of the newest. It is in the Lost Continent, and it is the abandoned temple of the former Poseidon's Fury, Escape from the Lost City. This opening day attraction was a really unique walkthrough show in the park that closed in May of 2023. The show had some really great special effects and memorable scenes, but one of the most iconic things about Poseidon's Fury was its impressive facade that still exists in the park. I know it closed somewhat recently, but it really is kind of wild to see a building this gigantic sit unused like this. If you had never been to Universal before and you saw this building, you'd think it was just a giant facade like Hogwarts Castle or something, but there are some things left over from the former attraction. The attraction's marquee sign is still in its original location, and they got rid of the Poseidon's Fury, but kept the Escape from the Lost City for some reason. You can see the frame to the former entrance where you'd go through like the regular line, through the express line, and if you really wanted to, you could walk all the way up to the building and get to where you used to enter and exit the ride. Now it's all blocked off. Kind of a fun history Easter egg is that the gift shop next to the Poseidon's Fury building is called Treasures of Poseidon, and it actually has the first version of Poseidon. Before the show changed to like the most recent version that we know with like Taylor, the tour guide and stuff like that, it actually used to feature Poseidon as the villain, and this is what he looked like in the first version of the show. A lot of references to what used to be here with Poseidon's Fury, but unfortunately for us, the temple has been sealed for good. Rest in peace, Poseidon's Fury. There's another big abandoned area in the Lost Continent, and this one here is probably one of the coolest. In the Sindbad Village section, behind the Mystic Fountain, you'll find a beautifully decorated archway, which used to be the entrance to the 8th Voyage of Sindbad stunt show. This, like Poseidon's Fury, was another opening day experience in the park, and this was an action-packed, firework-loaded stunt show with performers fighting, lighting on fire, and plummeting to their deaths. This show ran all the way until 2018, and the 1,800-person theater still stands. What's really cool about this one is you can walk all the way up to the entrance of the theater and see the big stage that's been abandoned. It's just like sitting there. You don't get that very often where an abandoned ride or show is so easily accessible from the park and everything is still there. This is actually where they put the extended queue for Hagrid's motorbike adventure. So when the line gets so long and it stretches out of the queue for Hagrid's, this is where they put people. But apart from that, like in the afternoon, later in the day, this area actually ends up being a really, really quiet area, very peaceful. I think that eventually Sindbad, Poseidon, and really all of the Lost Continent will go away. So before it does, go check out this area one last time and see what remains of Sindbad's final voyage. Now, this next one here, this is probably like the most abandoned of the abandoned Universal stuff. This is super popular. There's been tons of videos about it already, but we got to talk about it in this video here. It brings us over to Jurassic Park, and we are talking about the Triceratops Encounter. This is an abandoned area that doesn't really exist anymore. If you have been on the Jurassic World Velocicoaster, you have been flying over where the Triceratops Encounter used to be. And really quickly, for those who don't know what it is, the Triceratops Encounter was a walkthrough experience where you would go through the facilities of Jurassic Park and you would see like all the different ways they like take care of the animals. They'd have like the food, they'd have cages, they'd have vehicles, all that stuff. And then eventually you would go and see a big real life Triceratops in person. It was this really impressive animatronic for the time. It ran from park open till about 2003, stopped for a long time, and then it reopened in 2010 through 2012. And then it stayed closed forever. Eventually they cleared all of that out for the Velocicoaster construction in 2019, but in between that time, the Triceratops Encounter actually sat abandoned. And this was like truly what you imagine when you thought of abandoned. There were videos of people going into the Triceratops Encounter area, and you could see all of the leftover props, overgrown trees, broken rails, and even leftover Triceratops animatronics, some of them with their skin and eyeballs taken off. Unfortunately, not much left of the Triceratops Encounter now, though there is one reference to it on the Velocicoaster. On the very first time that you go upside down on the Velocicoaster, if you look down, I mean, good luck because the ride's so fast, but if you look over, down, there's actually a bag of dino chow. It's kind of like a beige and blue bag. This is a prop from the original Triceratops Encounter. It's a pretty fun Easter egg, but like I said, good luck trying to see it. Rest in peace to Triceratops Encounter. I wish they still found a way to exist in the park. And the last of the abandoned attractions at IOA is the Toon Lagoon Amphitheater, and this is something that you've probably seen before. If you're going to and from Marvel Superhero Island, you have to pass through it. This is a stage that gets used every so often. I think they use it for cheer competitions throughout the year, but originally, this was a space that held a lot of different shows in the park. The first ever show that was held there was a show called the Pandemonium Cartoon Circus. This was a Toon Lagoon show that featured all the different characters. They would sing and dance and do little tricks and things like that. It's kind of a cheesy, kind of a corny show that definitely wouldn't exist or do very well in 2025. I would recommend checking out the Storybook Amusement YouTube page. He's got all the videos of Islands Adventure retro stuff there, including a video of this show. That went on from 1999, park open, to 2000, so not very long. The next one was a show called Extreme X Venture, which was like this like BMX stunt show with like skaters and skateboarders and like a half pipe, and they'd all do tricks and stuff. This was kind of a harder one to find footage for, but there it is. And then that eventually evolved into a show called Matt Hoffman's Crazy Freakin' Stunt Show, which was the actual name. This was another BMX show. For some reason, Universal thought like BMX was like the thing, and maybe like in the early 2000s it was, but it's kind of a random show to have at Islands of Adventure, a park that prides itself so much on theming and immersion. But I also get it, it's like a weird space to use in the park. Why don't you just go put a bunch of bikes there? This space was also used for Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure. This is a really popular show, and for the 5 years that Islands of Adventure hosted Halloween Horror Nights, they would put the show on here, which to me, that's a great use of space. That makes a lot of sense. Now, the theater kind of just sits there. You can't really get close to it either. It's all kind of roped off, so it's not like Sindbad where you can go and see what the theater looks like, so it couldn't tell you if it's like well maintained or anything like that. This is an area that will definitely go away whenever they decide to overhaul Toon Lagoon. Okay, now we are heading on over to Universal Studios Florida, where I'm going to have to start getting a little creative with the term abandoned here, because there aren't really that many leftover areas in this park, but there is a lot of like fun history with things that used to be here, and I think it'd be cool to show you guys, hopefully some deep cuts. The first one of those brings us over to the Hollywood area of the park, where we are focusing on the Williams of Hollywood building. Now this space does still get used in the park. This is where they typically put like the summer tribute store in the park, but does anyone remember what this used to be? It was two different things. The most recent being the antique shop. This was actually like an old prop shop where you could go and buy strange little knickknacks, little obscure items, but they also had big pieces of former rides. So you could buy things like signs from the old earthquake ride, and then one of the most famous was one of the flying cows from the Twister ride. And tell me if you remember this. This was a magic shop. They used to do magic shows in the park. They actually used to do it over at Islands of Adventure as well. Now what we know as the Halloween store used to be a place where they would do magic, and this was kind of like harder to find footage of because I don't think they allowed filming when you were in there. But I do remember seeing it, and basically it was like an infomercial for all the magic tricks that they would sell at the actual shop. Leave a comment down below if you remember seeing this show. The next piece of the past actually brings us over to the newly opened DreamWorks land, and this little thing here is kind of obscure. There is only one way that you're going to be able to see this as a guest. You are going to have to be getting on a Mardi Gras float, and you can't take any pictures, to see what is left over of the original Hard Rock Cafe. Specifically, like one little piece of road that used to exist for the building. For those who don't know, in the back of the park, they actually used to have a Hard Rock Cafe, and it was actually a really cool building. It was shaped like a giant guitar, and you could enter and exit the park from there, and you could have food and stuff like that. The best thing I can do is show you like a map of the park from like Apple Maps that shows the pathway. You can kind of see it right there. It's right behind the roller coaster. If you head to like the exit area of the roller coaster, you can kind of see a little backstage and like see what's left over, but it is kind of hard to see from there, and really you're just looking for like a stone pathway. It is super, super obscure. Nothing really remarkable about it, but it is a piece of history, and if you're someone who likes to feel where things used to be, get on a Mardi Gras float and you can try to imagine where the old Hard Rock Cafe used to be. The next one is the big abandoned theater of Universal Studios Florida. This is right next to the Men in Black ride. There have been two major shows in this space. The most recent was Fear Factor Live. This was based off the popular reality show where they would actually get contestants from the park to perform physical challenges, put their head in a tank and get like scorpions on top of it. They would do all of this and they would win a Fear Factor Live shirt, which would actually kind of be cool to own now. This show premiered in 2005 and ran on and off all the way until 2020. If you visit the theater, you can actually see a lot of things left over from Fear Factor. All the yellow and black caution tape design is part of the Fear Factor aesthetic. And before every show, they would actually cast guests from the park, and that whole casting section has been left over. There's a Fear Factor sign that's been covered up. You can see where it used to say casting, and there's even still footprints on the ground where contestants stood to get picked for the show. You can stand behind the booth too, but there's nothing there, just some stickers from the Men in Black ride. Before Fear Factor though, this used to be the Wild 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 West stunt show, a show that ran from 1991 to 2003. This was your typical cowboy-themed stunt show with fighting and guns and falling, and the big finale piece was a building that would explode and fall over one of the actors, kind of like Charlie Chaplin. The set of the cowboy show was left over and used for Fear Factor Live, and you can kind of see it whenever you go see the show at Halloween Horror Nights. This is what the space gets used for the most nowadays. The Halloween Nightmare Fuel show has existed here for the past 4 years. Before that, it was the Academy of Villains. Before that, this was the longtime home of Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure, a really great show that I miss dearly. A lot of people love. You can't help talk about it when you talk about Halloween Horror Nights. If you had never seen that show, oh, you had to be there. It was so awesome. And one last little spot that's kind of related to Halloween Horror Nights is the Nazarman's Building and Sting Alley. Now, Nazarman's is the name of this fake pawn shop in the New York street, but did you know way back when they actually used to put haunted houses in this area? Before the Starbucks and the Haagen-Dazs were added to the building, there have been 10 haunted houses in this space. It's definitely not as spacious as a soundstage, but what made this unique was a lot of the houses actually involved the Sing Alley area, so you would have a haunted house that went outside. Isn't that awesome? They'll still use this street to add a food booth for the event, but how cool would it be to have a haunted house in this area again? A haunted house that went outside. That to me is so unique. That sounds so awesome. I hope that maybe one day that happens again soon. But apart from that, that is really all I've got for you guys. Those are all of the abandoned spaces I know of here at Universal Orlando. Pretty cool stuff, and like I said, you probably knew about a lot of these before, but I'm hoping that I got to show you something new. Please leave a comment down below if you think I missed any. Share with me some of your favorite memories of these leftover and abandoned attractions. We love to see it. Thank you guys for watching another VincentVision, and I will see you at the next one. Bye-bye.